Hi, everybody. Here's another episode of Be Heard Women Empowering Women. And today we are blessed to have the lovely Lisa Tickel, who has a lot of experience in childhood trauma. In fact, she had facilitated a child abuse healing workshop for a long time, I think 8 years, right, Lisa?
Correct. Correct.
All right. So, Lisa, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Okay, sure. So, yes, I'm a childhood abuse healing survivor. I call myself a healing survivor. I'm still healing. And my abuse goes back as far as I can remember. It was a part of me. The abuse was mostly physical, emotional, and verbal abuse.
Mhm.
And it was done, and there was also neglect. So there was also from my brother and my parents. And I lost my mom to cancer when I was 16. So there was a lot of unresolved stuff there. And I took my childhood abuse into my adult life. And I can remember back as far as like being 19 years old and feeling like something wasn't right. I didn't feel like there was something wrong with me, which was good. I just felt like there was something not right. I didn't understand. And so I
Mhm.
started my healing journey really back when I was 19. There wasn't a lot of stuff out there to help us, right? And I
Yeah.
didn't have any adults helping me. I was doing this completely on my own, me and
Well,
God.
you didn't grow up in a supportive home to begin with, you know,
Oh,
and that's part of it because your core beliefs are whatever your parents kind of taught you or showed you, gave you examples of. And do you think then around 19 or whatever that you started to tend to go towards abusive relationships with men?
so interesting you asked that. That was perfect timing because at that time I got together with my first husband. I knew him. We were friends for a few years, and we were both really hot messes coming together. And we were together actually for 30 years, married 25. And when I look back on it, it was abusive. There was neglect there for sure. I felt like I said, we both had a lot of problems, but I outgrew him. And so I
So,
felt like for many years, I was actually had another kid instead of a husband.
right, right. And I
Um,
think too that I've had two damaged ex-husbands, and I think that we get attracted to that stuff because it's familiar. We
yes,
don't, and it's subconscious, but it is. It's familiar. So when you mentioned the word neglect in that relationship, I thought reflective of what you grew up in.
correct.
And so, how much you are explaining to us, I think, how much childhood trauma affects you as an adult.
Correct. And I had on a podcast, I had a really great question asked, and the question was, if left unhealed, would you go into domestic violence? Possibly. Yeah. You're going to go into an abusive relationship. It might just look different.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized, and so much of my realization has come over the last year, and a lot of it is because I found out a lot about my mom, and I put the whole timeline together really for me.
Yeah,
And I can see why ended up in that relationship and in that family because I just basically married my family.
exactly. Well, they
I
say
married
you
my
marry your father. So
Oh,
they used to
very
say
much.
that. And I did it in their personalities or their defects or whatever. And one of my daughters, when she brought home her prospective husband, I looked at him and I actually saw her biological father and her stepfather. And I thought, oh no. And unfortunately, I was right. That was not a good outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I didn't have any guidance on relationships or anything. And my
Mm,
father didn't like my husband then. He didn't like my boyfriend. And but I didn't get the guidance of, honey, you know what? He's not good for you. Instead, I got criticized. So what did I do? I clung on to him even more.
yes,
And
yes.
again, we were both, we were both had a lot of problems and came into
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
into the marriage. Um, and so that marriage finally dissolved. My second marriage, I literally ran right into another man's arms. And I look back and he ended up being very much a narcissist. It was really, I didn't see that one coming at all.
No.
I did not see that one coming at all. But what I realized too, the one thing that I carried from my childhood is I didn't feel loved, right? I mean, how can
Mhm.
you feel loved when you're being abused? So I was on a mission. I was going to find love. And with
Yeah,
my first husband, it was nobody else is going to love me. This is the only man on the face of the earth that's going to love me. Finally, I found somebody that loves me. And so that's what I
exactly.
did.
Yeah, and then when the defects start showing up, because a lot of times, when you're just dating, they're so wonderful. And there's,
Yeah.
of course, they're wooing you, as they say. But then when you get married and the red flags start popping up, the
Mhm.
defects, the abuse, emotional, whatever. I don't know about you, but in my mind, I was like, well, I could change him. I could
Oh,
change
yeah.
that.
He's got so much potential, right? Oh, he's got so much potential, right?
Yeah, and I have to teach him how to, but I did not know that because I was in a victim mode, which I
Right.
didn't know at the time.
Yes.
I was in victim mode, attracting, like you said, narcissistic,
Mhm.
controlling. I call it toxic masculinity. There's a lot of that, which starts out as, oh, I need you by me all the time and I love you, turns into such control that they're telling you how to dress, who to talk to. And when you rebel against that, then sometimes the physical abuse starts.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
let me ask you this. I know you talked, I think you said in one thing I read that you're a mindset coach. Did you use that term, mindset?
You know, I held on to that for a short time because I am a firm believer that so much can be changed just by your mindset.
Yeah.
And you can be stuck in something like you just mentioned about the victim mindset.
Hmm.
I 100% had that. 100%. And when I think back, it's so funny because I can think back and remember some of the mindsets that I had. And one of them was that, look, I was abused as a child and everybody was mean to me. So everybody in the world now, they need to be nice to me. Don't you be mean to me because I was abused. So I totally had the victim mindset and I was not owning my own stuff. I
And
was
then you're
not
attracting
owning.
people that are going to do exactly what you don't want done.
Right, right. And I
Yeah.
was mistreating people. I was not behaving properly. I mean, my husband and I had a conversation with my son just a couple weeks ago when I was up visiting him. And I told him, I said, honey, you were raised in a home where there was strife and there was screaming. And we did. My husband and I screamed at each other. And I didn't grow up in the screaming, but I grew up in the constant tension.
Yeah.
So the mindset to me, I have changed my mindset. And so for a while I was calling myself a mindset coach and I stopped because it just seems like it seems to be a buzzword kind of, and
Yeah.
I want it to be taken serious because your
Yeah.
mindset is very important to your healing and your growing.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, with what I went through, and I wrote the book, Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons.
Oof.
Raised by, don't you love that title?
Yeah,
But
says a
it's so
lot.
true because Raised by Wolves was my parents, and the Trapped by Demons was in the men. And my brother Joe always used to say that. I'd say something about our family, and he'd say, "Marie, we were raised by wolves," and I never knew what he meant. And then as I got older and as I healed, because I had coping strategies that were unhealthy for the first half of my life,
Oh yeah.
and addictions, whatever. I think the key to my healing, and it took more than once, was being in a very dark place. Now, I was in a very dark place. I made a major change, but then I didn't change myself. I changed the circumstances.
Right.
So it took me 5 years, 5 years of making the decision to change to actually doing it. Does that make sense to you?
Totally. It totally makes sense. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I had to go through. And I think the key to my healing was the final time when I finally got the right guy and everything was
Mhm.
wonderful. And I was so depressed and
Mm.
I still wasn't happy, you
Your
know.
circumstances were better, right?
Yeah, but I
But
wasn't.
right, but the inner you, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the core. And long story short, I unfortunately accidentally got into pain medications because of an
Mhm.
injury, but I was an alcoholic at the time.
Mhm.
So I didn't think the instructions on the bottle were meant for me. that said, do not take with alcohol.
That's so unfortunate because I think a lot of people, I think that
I
that's
know. And if you're an
it's very
alcoholic,
common.
unfortunately, you're going to say, well, I'll just have one. But you're an
Right,
alcoholic, so you won't have one. And now
right,
you took your pain medication or your muscle
right.
relaxer. And I started to have blackouts. And I was always a control freak. So
Hmm.
blackouts, losing control of what,
Yes.
knowing what I did,
Yep.
that sent me, I went to rehab.
Yep.
And I didn't
Yep.
even know where I was going or what they were going to do to me. But I knew I had a problem. I had a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that people do have to hit a bottom
Yeah.
emotionally, spiritually,
Hmm.
like psychologically. So
Hmm.
I still have triggers. Do you still have triggers?
Yeah, that's funny you say that. I actually, yeah, and I mentioned this in a my podcast I did yesterday and the day before, actually, that I just got triggered just 2 weeks ago when I was up in Idaho visiting my son. And for me, I am a absolute firm believer that um, in order to really heal and grow, you have to have self-awareness, because self-awareness is going to show you everything, right? And
Yes.
so I had been noticing my triggers. I've been aware of my triggers for a few years now,
Yeah.
but I went in deeper. And so it was so funny because a couple weeks ago, my husband and I, something happened and I was triggered, and crazy stuff was coming to my mind. Crazy stuff was coming out of my mouth. And the husband I am married to now is a saint. He is
Yeah, mine too.
wonderful. And he is patient. There's
Yeah.
no criticism, no judgment. I finally looked at him, we're driving around, and I said, you know what? I am clearly being triggered. I am clearly being triggered because the thoughts that are going through my mind make no sense whatsoever,
Yeah.
are illogical. And he smiled at me. He just smiled at me. And I
Yeah.
said, we're not going to do that crazy stuff that I keep saying we're going to do. We're going to do the good stuff. And so that's what happens. So I still get triggered. And the wonderful thing though, even though I'm still triggered, I know how to manage it. First of all, I'm aware of it.
Exactly.
And so when
You know. Yeah.
the crazy thoughts start going through your head and that they're not logical,
Right.
stop, take a deep breath, stop, and I sit and think about it and I go, okay, brain, what do you want to do? No, we're not doing that because that's crazy. We're gonna try something else, and I'm gonna find
Yes.
something healthy.
Yes.
And that's been huge. I think that to a degree will always have those triggers just because my
Fine.
whole foundation of growing up was
No. Well, a
abuse.
lot of times there's people in the world that you have to deal with. It's not like you have a choice.
Right.
And there's narcissists and there's toxic men, etc. And they might set off one of your triggers. And the fact that you know you have triggers, you're way far ahead of a lot of people already, right?
Right. Right.
And the pause thing and the think about it. But like my minister is very big on saying, go to your heart, like
Yeah.
breathe. And he's right, because most people stay in their head. And when
Right.
you stay in your head, it's not always good.
Overthinking, craziness.
Overthinking. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I do that a lot. And
Hmm.
tapping. I don't know if you ever
Hmm.
tried tapping,
Hmm.
just tapping my over my heart and breathing and the anger, because it's usually the trigger brings up anger, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, or resentment or the feeling of being a victim again. And I
For
was the
me, it was
oldest.
I didn't have a
Yeah,
voice again. My voice got
exactly.
shut down, right? And I
Yes.
finally have a voice over the last 5 years. And
Yes,
that triggered, one of the things it triggered was, oh, you can't have a voice right now.
exactly.
Oh, I'm going to have a voice, so that kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And then I was the oldest of four children, and from 5 years on, old on, I was kind of raising my siblings because of
yeah.
the alcoholism and
Hmm.
the. My mother was very emotionally detached and wanted to work full time, so we didn't have a lot of time with her. That was nice. She wasn't a hugger
Yeah.
or a kisser or anything. She gave us no
Mhm.
touching, nothing. So the thing of it was, I had to go back into therapy because of 2020 because my husband has Parkinson's and it was awful.
Mhm.
And this therapist said, you were the hero. That was your role in the family. And you still want to be the
Mhm.
hero. So whenever there's a problem, you try to solve it, even if it's not your problem, you know.
That makes sense.
And I get myself in trouble because I sit on boards and I'm involved in organizations. And all of a sudden, I find I'm doing too much,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not doing the self care. Do you find that happens a lot? We take on that role.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I was a caregiver to my mom, I was a
Mhm,
caregiver to my dad, and I was a
mhm.
caregiver to my late husband because
Oh,
my second
my.
husband. Yeah. So I definitely would go into that role of not taking care of myself. And as a matter of fact, I've had numerous surgeries on the upper part of my body, numerous surgeries from not, and I worked out. Like there were things that I did do to take care of myself,
Mhm.
but the important things of slowing down, no, I did not. I would take on everybody's problem, the world problems, try to fix it myself. And over the last 5 years, I've switched that, and I pick up on when I get overwhelmed and I
Yes.
slow it down. The thing I still need to work on is the guilt of saying no. I still I
Yes.
still feel it, right? I can say
Yes.
no, but oh gosh, I'll spend a little time in my head, ruminating about, I said no to this person. Now they're going to
No, no,
pull up
no, no,
abandonment
no.
stuff.
No, no, no. No is the most important word. And it's the
Yes,
hardest to use, isn't it?
it is.
No.
Yes.
And it's a
And
complete sentence. No.
exactly. I know
You
I've been
don't
hearing
have to
that so much
reason.
lately.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to the healing part. Have you been able to forgive your abusers?
I have. I'm still kind of working a little bit on my mom, but I have. I actually forgave my brother years ago when I went through the workshop, because I went through the workshop myself, the one that I
Mhm,
headed. So I went through that, and at that time, I worked through it. And I can honestly say, when I think about my brother, and I don't have a relationship with him because
mhm.
he tried to abuse my son, and so I cut that
Right.
off right
Yeah.
there. But I can think about him, and I do wish him the best. I want him healed for sure. But I don't have a relationship with him. My mom and my dad, I have forgiven them both. The thing I still kind of get stuck on, I catch myself on, is I'm the one that broke the abuse in my family. And I don't
Mhm.
understand why my mom didn't, why she wasn't strong enough not to be that way,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Well, they were who they were. I look back
Yeah.
to what they grew up with, and in my book, I go into a lot of my father's situation. But I have been able to forgive everyone except for the ex-husband that fathered my children because it affected
Mhm.
them. His
Yes,
not paying
yes.
child support, his physical abuse in front of them, all those things that he did. I have come to a point where I can tolerate being in his presence, which doesn't happen too often.
Yeah.
But to actually say he's forgiven, it's tough. That one's tough.
Sometimes it's a process. I mean,
Yeah.
forgiveness to me, when I did the workshop, the last night was on forgiveness, and I taught on forgiveness. And it's a real process. And we also have to forgive ourselves. Right? So
That's where it's going. Hmm.
yeah, the one big thing that people don't realize is, like, I was in survival mode all my life until
Yes.
about 5 years ago, and I did some stupid stuff. I did some stuff that hurt other people,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I still struggle with forgiving myself about that, because
Yeah.
but I was doing, my son said to me, because he was one of them that I sat down and had a heart to heart with,
Yeah.
and he
Hmm.
said, "Mom, you did the best you could. Look at me, I turned out pretty good,
Exactly. Oh,
by
my
the grace
children
of
turned out
God."
wonderful. But 30 years ago, when I was first introduced to therapy after I got sober, this one therapist said to me, you went from victim mode to survivor mode.
Right,
Now you have to go beyond that. You
correct,
have to go into integrating everything to be the whole
right.
person.
Living your life.
Yes, yes, and that's extremely hard. And I think what I like about AA is when they have that step on amends. You get to say to your children,
Yeah.
that help. Forgive me because I wasn't the best mother, and that helps you too. But you do feel that sometimes, like, oh, I could have been a better mother, but then you look back and you think you were a 300% better than the mother you had.
Yeah, and the thing is that we tend to do, our mind gets in our way, and we
Yes,
tend to focus on the negative,
yes.
instead of, because the one thing I will say is, it's only by the grace of God that I didn't get heavily into drugs or
Mhm.
alcoholism. And I think the only reason why I didn't is because I witnessed it and it scared me. And it was that whole control thing of,
Yeah,
I feel like I would lose control, and so, but what I did instead is I ate. My coping
I
mechanism
did that.
is eating.
Yes, I did
So
that
I
too.
struggled with my weight all my life.
Yes,
And then I got
yes,
a mother who bought the crap that I ate and
yeah,
then turned around and criticized me for putting, and I
yeah. She
honestly
was
didn't
enabling
understand.
you and criticizing you at the same time. It's,
And I honestly, when I think back, I
yeah.
had no idea why I was putting on weight. I didn't know. I didn't know it was the eating.
People
I didn't
have to
either.
realize too with addiction, there every time somebody says addiction, it doesn't necessarily mean alcohol and drugs, you
No.
know. And when I went to treatment, they told me I was cross addicted and dual diagnosed. Basically, cross addicted meant that I could get addicted to anything because that
Hmm.
would be a coping strategy for
Hmm.
me till I
Correct.
learned new ones. And the dual diagnosed, the whole reason I got into alcohol was I had chronic depression and anxiety disorder, and I was self medicating. I never wanted to drink, but then once I did, and I was like 21 before I drank, and I saw that the calming effect it
Yeah.
had on me and everything,
Yeah.
and then the genetics kicked in,
Yeah.
and the genetic part gave me the ability to have a high tolerance, which really was to my detriment, because
Right.
that was it. But I did the food thing too, because when I put
Yeah.
down alcohol, I picked up food,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
so
Food
it's
was a big
always
food and sitting in front of the TV, I realized. Just kind of seriously. I mean, I think back on like now I'm ready to like shut the cable off and but
don't sit in front, yeah. I know.
I would sit there for hours, but it was, and again, I didn't realize at the time that's what it was, but I think back now and it certainly was a coping mechanism for sure.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
and I was a year sober and I went away. I went to California actually. And I went there for 3 weeks. The drug and alcohol had been 4 weeks. So my husband, who's still my husband, 34 years we're together. So it was
Mm.
them, not me. Because the other two were like, forget about it. But when I was going, he said, "Are you going to go away every year?" And I said, if I have to, I said, if I have to, I did
Yeah.
not, I just did not stop working on myself. I did not. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
9 years straight therapy, 32 years in AA, you know, always having some spiritual program. It doesn't have to be AA,
Right.
but you need something like outside of yourself, you know?
Correct. Right.
So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
work. It is work. But if you do it, it's worth it.
That's the thing I say when you've never experienced, when you're at the beginning of your healing and you get that first, I don't know, healing piece and you feel
Hmm.
that freedom and you don't have that heaviness on you and you start feeling that freedom. For me, I was like, I want more of that. How do I get more of that? And for
Yeah.
years, there wasn't all this out there. There was therapy and I did go to therapy, but there isn't the stuff that there is now,
Yes.
which is so helpful. I mean, you got
Yeah.
to be careful of what some of the stuff you watch, but yeah, it's been a journey, and I know it's a journey I'll be on for the rest of my life. But
Yes.
I don't feel like you ever fully heal. I think you have measures of healing and you learn how to manage it. Like we're still getting triggered, right? But we now know
Nothing.
how to manage that and it
Yeah.
doesn't control us anymore.
Yeah.
It's not consuming us. It
Yeah. And
used
it's
to
a
completely
shorter
take over.
period of it. It's like you
Yeah.
don't ruminate and walk around with resentment. It's like you
No.
feel it, you know what it is, you sit with yourself, you breathe, whatever, meditate, whatever you have to do, and you can let
Yeah.
it go. You know,
One of the things that I recognize what would happen to me when I would get triggered like that is the anger would completely consume me. And how I recognized this was a few months ago, something happened, and that usually would have sent me, being
mhm,
completely angry, and it
mhm.
didn't. The situation didn't, and I had a different perspective. And I remember stopping and going, "How does this feel? Wow, this feels really good." Because it made me realize when I would get angry like that, it consumed every part of me.
You know what I found too? When I did get angry in the early years of sobriety, when I'd still get very angry about something, it would totally drain me. Like
Oh, yes.
afterwards, it would be like I had been working in the mines all day. I would be just
Mhm.
fatigued. It took
Mhm.
just
The
everything.
recovery would take a long time.
Yeah, I
That's what,
miss
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it would completely drain you. You're right.
You're right,
It
it does. It
sucks all
really
your energy.
does. It's
Mhm.
consuming. So, are you going to start your own podcast?
I am. We're starting it in August. I've already recorded some, and the first episode is going to be my story. I've never told my story completely,
Yeah.
except in therapy. And
Yeah.
so my girlfriend and she sat down, and there's a lot she didn't know, and she's watched most of my growth. So
Uh-huh.
it's starting in August. It's called Healing and Growing Hand in Hand.
That's the name of the podcast channel.
Healing and Growing Hand in Hand.
Okay.
And it is, it's going to be, yeah, we're going to talk about childhood abuse and trauma, because, trauma can be a child was just sick a lot, and that's traumatic to them. It wasn't necessarily abuse,
Where they
but
had a sick parent that they
or
grew
a
up
sick
with.
parent.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And so there's different trauma, but it's also going to
Yes.
be about growing. And it's for anybody in any walk of their life. I
Yes.
definitely have men on there. I've already have two guests, at least two or three lined up of men sharing about their abuse, because for men it's different.
It's harder.
It
It's
is
harder.
harder. It is
Mhm.
harder. They have a whole different set of shame
Yeah.
factors that we don't carry.
Well, they have core beliefs that are different than us too.
Correct.
We know we can be gentle and vulnerable and be intimate, and their core beliefs have been taught, unfortunately, strong boys don't cry, that kind of thing. You
Suck it up,
know,
buttercup,
and they still do that. I mean, they
Yeah, yeah.
still do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that needs to change. That really needs to change. And so I wanted to create a platform where experts could come on and,
Mhm.
we could talk about limiting beliefs or boundaries or whatever, but also a platform for people to have a voice and share their story of their trauma and their healing. I want to put as much hope out there that, yeah, you and I came from some really traumatic childhood experiences,
Mhm.
and we could have gone in a lot of different directions, but we have healed and we've grown and we're helping others.
Let me ask you, what platform are you using to get your podcast out? I use Buzzsprout. I don't know if you heard of that.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. No, so I'm going to be putting it on YouTube, and then it'll be on Spotify and Apple, and I'm using Anchor. So apparently Anchor is
And
a platform that sends it out to many.
that's what
Um,
Buzzsprout does too. It
yeah,
sends it out to iHeartRadio, all of them,
right,
Apple,
right,
which
right.
I think is fantastic.
Yeah, makes it so much easier.
It does. And at first, I started off with two podcasts, maybe a month, and then that's free. That was totally free. 2 hours, not 2 hours. And then I started really getting a lot of good guests and things. And now
Mhm.
I paid it's $12 for heaven's sakes to get the message out to more people, and I've been doing it.
And that's important.
And I hope your podcast is very successful also. I will
Thank
be
you. Thank you.
listening to it.
Yes.
And
And I'm looking for guests. So if you would love to be a
yes,
guest,
of course, of course.
I would love to have
I
you.
am going to, you have Kindle or on your iPhone? Do you have an iPhone?
No, I'm an Android.
Okay, so if I was going to send you my book, I couldn't send it to Kindle, though, right? You don't have a Kindle.
No, I don't have Kindle on there. Do
Well,
you
I'll
have it
find
on
a way.
Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay, I can pull it up from there because
Okay,
I
yeah.
can listen. I don't have Kindle per se.
Yeah, okay, good. Because when you just hear part of my story, you'll see that I'll be a good guest.
Yes, yes. What's the name of your book? Let me write it down real quick.
One more time. Raised by Wolves,
Oh, that's right.
Trapped by Demons. If you put in Raised by Wolves alone, you'll get all these werewolf stories. So you have to put the Trapped by Demons. Thank you so much, Lisa. You're a wonderful guest.
Thank you.
And we will be talking again, I'm sure.
Yes,
All
yes.
right. Have a great day.
You too.
Don't get triggered.
Yeah, you either.
Bye.
Bye.